Welcome to Soul Night Live, episode number 106. Today, our guest is Kevin Godley.
Hello.
Hi, Kevin.
Yeah, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for taking time out of
Good.
your evening to come on the show and chat. I really
Sure.
appreciate it.
No problem.
So, I guess it's been a little while since we spoke last time. We were talking about muscle memory, and I was just kind of curious what you've been up to in the last
Yeah.
6 months since we spoke. Anything musical or otherwise?
Um, Nothing musical yet, although I've been thinking about how to approach doing some music. The sort of cogs are turning a bit, but I've been writing more than anything else. I've been working on a script, a screenplay that I originally wrote with a fellow writer, a guy called Adrian Devoy, long time ago, back in sort of mid 90s, and it suddenly felt timely for the story that this is telling. So I wanted to try and bring it up to date. So I've been playing around with that for the last few weeks or so, and a few other interesting things. I've been asked to do some screen content for a couple of operas, which is something totally different for me.
Right?
um, I'm getting involved with yes, that's. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, I guess it's not that far away from making music videos, but it's just that the music is radically different. So it's a different kind of challenge. And various other things. I mean, it's sort of getting involved with a new video games and tech startup, and another group of people who've come together from lots of different creative disciplines. So I know I'm being a little bit vague, but lots of sort of interesting things bubbling on the horizon. You know, I can't sort of say I've done this and it's about to come out because I haven't. But as ever, it's everything's sort of in play,
Okay.
pretty
Well,
much.
it sounds like you've got some different things cooking. The script you spoke of does that have to do with the Orson Welles epic that you were working
No,
on when we spoke last time?
no, it's nothing to do with the Orson Welles thing. It's about the TV industry, and the mood of the thing is, it's, I guess it's a dark comedy, but it's a very, very dark comedy. And I guess the thing that inspired me to write something like this is very dialogue heavy, and it takes place in pretty much two locations, two interior locations. But it's films like 12 Angry Men, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, those sort of very enclosed, contracted situations appeal to me as opposed to big sort of cinematic blowouts. So, and that's what this is. There's a lot of people talking, or very few people talking a lot. Is probably closer to the truth. But that, as a writer, that's quite a challenge because that's actually what we do most of the time. We don't go around shooting people, and we don't wear capes, you know. So at least I don't. I don't know what you do, but
It's at the
that
dry
interests
cleaners.
me. Getting inside people, yeah. But that interests me. I mean, that's sort of. I like films that are real. I love films like On the Waterfront and stuff that digs a little deeper and exposes people for what they can be or what they really are. So that's interesting. It's not easy, but it's good fun when you find something that works as a piece of repartee between people. It's just as exciting as writing a good lyric,
Yeah,
maybe even better
yeah.
sometimes.
I could see a connection, definitely, and it's always nice to have someone to bounce some ideas off of as well. I think I'm at my best when someone can stop me and say, "Hey, that's good. Let's follow up on that," rather than "Don't be indulgent here."
Yeah, yeah. Oh, there's plenty of indulgence. That's, but I don't know. I hope I've developed a sort of sense for when it's getting out of hand. I mean, I because writing a screenplay, it's much bigger than writing a song is this big, so you can see the beginning and the end, you know. But a screenplay, most of it is in peripheral vision for most of the time. And if you change something in a screenplay, it changes everything. Even if it's like dropping a pebble in a pond, it ripples outwards. So you have to be very careful that you don't let that get away from you, you know?
Yeah.
And that's tricky to make sense of sometimes.
Excellent. And am I right? You just celebrated a birthday.
You are.
Yeah. Well,
I wouldn't say
congratulations on another.
celebrated, but I just had one.
Yeah. Well,
Thank
congratulations on
you.
another trek around the sun.
Congratulations on making it this far.
Hey,
Yeah,
only the lucky get
yeah,
to,
October
you
the
know,
7th. October the 7th.
definitely. Well, I
Well,
wanted to talk a bit
it's
about.
been fun so far.
Absolutely. Well, we've enjoyed what you've shared with us so far, and when we last were chatting, we were talking about your solo album, your first, called Muscle Memory. It's been out of over a year now, I believe. But I just wanted to mention it for anyone that tunes into this episode and maybe didn't see the first one. Although I will put a little link here for people that want to watch the first one uh, at their leisure. We discuss a lot regarding 10cc in particular in that episode. And if that isn't enough, well, they can always break out one of these and read it at their leisure, right?
That's not
Which,
a bad
or
book,
as
actually.
you
It's a
did,
very good
remember
book.
your
It's yes.
yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed reading that. And, I had mentioned in my email that, I had a few 10cc albums before we chat. And, I was
Yeah.
somewhat familiar, but your chat really inspired me to dig deep and collect your whole discography. And it was a wonderful trip. I really enjoyed it.
Oh,
And,
great. Thank you.
I have to say, I think I enjoyed the Godley and Cream as much as the 10cc. And it really shone a light on exactly what you two brought to the equation. Because, I bought all the 10cc
Yeah.
albums, and the ones after you guys left are pretty different. Like a lot of the humor and a bit of the wit and snark was pretty much absent. And in its place was a lot of kind of I'm not in love-esque songs. Good stuff. Eric and Graham did some great stuff later too, but you could definitely tell what
Yes,
you
they
two
did.
brought to the party. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. Well, we were. It was. I mean, 10cc was a strange chemical made of lots of different elements, and that's kind. We balanced each other out very well, and somehow there were essentially two ways of working, but those two ways of working coalesced very well for those 4 years. But it does become increasingly obvious what both parties delivered when we went our separate ways.
oh,
We
very
went
true.
crazy, they went
And
straighter.
to me, it just seemed like the blend of all four of you made a really well balanced 10cc album. And once it was down to two, it kind of leaned in one direction in particular. And it great stuff, very well done, beautifully recorded, of course. But I found what you and Lol were doing on your own was much more adventurous, of course, and really enjoyed albums like
Well, it
Consequences.
was. I mean, we were reckless musically. I think
Uh,
we
I love
didn't have any breaks.
it.
Yeah, I
Well,
do.
yeah, well, it was great that you were
The-
in a time where you could be free to do whatever you wanted and express yourselves and have the world follow you. That's really great.
well, we were lucky that a little part of our sensibility uh, allowed the odd hit single to come through. I don't know where that came from, but um, it did. So I think it validated all the other sort of more experimental stuff. We probably had about 3 or 4 hit records during our tenure as Godley Creme. And
Yeah.
that, that's fine. That's fine. We sort of stuck our heads above the parapet and said, hey, we can do this as well. Um, and then we sort of dropped back down into the rabbit hole again,
All right.
which was where we felt more comfortable.
Yeah. Well, it's a great body of work, and I believe there's even a box set where you can get it all together called Body of Work. that you designed the cover and the
Yes,
sleeves and all that.
yes.
I wanted to kind of focus a little more on the visual side of things today and talk a bit about the album cover art and then talk about some of the videos that you and Lol did together and talk a bit about how video making advanced over the decade because just being a kid at home in my teens watching MTV, I kind of saw it all unfold and saw all these great videos that you two put together. And you could definitely see how
Yeah.
things changed. It seemed like early on it was mostly just film, and later it seems like computer graphics kind of worked their way into the equation. And anyway, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But I wanted to talk a
Okay.
bit about recording at Strawberry Sound because I was really struck listening to the early 10cc records by some of the great tones and sounds that you all captured. And I was kind of curious
Yeah.
how some of those came about, excuse me. Um, it's I can't think of any other rock band that had their own studio at their disposal, and just the attention to
Right.
detail when it came to production is really, really great. It kind of reminds me a bit of Steely Dan, but with a little more edge. And Steely Dan didn't own their own studio, but it's considering how much time they spent in one, they probably would have saved some money if they had bought one early on.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, that's true.
So,
It's
now, was Strawberry Sound
yeah.
something that you all embarked on together, or was it something that Eric had gotten into and then you hooked up with him and all became a team after he'd already got involved?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that any of what happened would have happened had it not have been for Strawberry. Strawberry was kind of the fifth member of the band, and it was the catalyst that kind of brought us all together. I think back in the day, and we're talking sort of late 60s, early 70s, there was no, as far as I recall, there was no professional recording studios in that part of the world. We lived in Manchester, and there was nothing. There was a few, there were a few music shops that had little demo studios that people would use. But if a band had been signed to a label, they had to go down south and record down south because that's where the business was and that's where the tech was. So Eric had this bee in his bonnet about wanting to open a great audio facility here. Everyone thought he was crazy for a while. And they eventually found, this was before we were involved, they eventually found a premises. And actually, just himself and Peter Tattersall, who was his partner, they literally built the thing from the ground up with their own bare hands. And they got a 4-track machine in that thing, 4-track machine and a little desk. And our first experience of Strawberry was Lol and myself were asked to sort of come in and sort of play stuff while they wired it up and made sure the mics worked and the baffling made sense, and which is what we did. And on a couple of those sessions, we were messing around. Eric was recording a drum sound, so I was sitting there playing the drums for hours on end, and we started to multi-track the drums. I don't know if we were doing them to see what multi-tracks were like, or whether we were doing them to find out if they lived better on this track or track 3 or track 4 with different EQs. But the upshot was that while I was playing, Lol was sat opposite me on the floor, strumming guitar and singing this nursery rhyme thing, Neanderthal Man thing. I fuck knows where it came from.
Yeah.
And that was picked up by the bass drum mic. And, I think originally he did it because I was getting bored just sitting there hammering away to nothing.
Sure.
And that became a record, essentially, because it was kind of a blueprint for trying stuff out. Let's try recorders and what they sound like with drums. Okay. what happens if we hit an anvil? Okay, that's how it works. And so it was really, it was a test bed. We should have been wearing white coats, you know.
Right.
And then we recorded this thing, and some fucker erased it. But we thought it was interesting, so we went back and did it again. But it was all in the pursuit of knowledge of how to make this little new studio function. And then somebody came along, some publisher came along and heard it, said that was a hit. So we released it under the bizarre name of Hot Legs, and it was a hit. So it was like, hang on a minute. A few months ago, we were just messing around, and we made this bizarre thing, and it was a hit. And then we made the mistake of not listening to what we'd just done, and went ahead and made an album that was absolutely nothing like that particular track, and it failed miserably. But in so doing, we were learning about what a studio could do. And they also, when people come into a recording studio and they've never seen a recording studio before, they say it's, wow, it's like the flight deck of Concorde. It's all those buttons and things. It's like,
Sure.
and there's a certain off-kilter truth about that, because that thing that looks like the flight deck of Concorde is designed to take you places as well. That's what it's for. But in here and up here, it's not going to take you anywhere physically. And we were kind of figuring out how to turn this piece of equipment to our will. And Lol and I were always sort of tinkerers. We were always about, okay, so this piece of equipment has been designed to do this particular thing. What happens if we unscrew it and we loosen this bit and put it back together upside down? What does it do then? And so after the horrified looks and howls of horror had gone away, we try it. And, 9 times out of 10, it did something interesting. So it was really, once we understood the basics of a studio, it became about tuning it to the way we thought and the way we approached the music making process. And I don't know, it worked for us because there were no limits. Once we understood, I mean, we had role models, of course, because what we were doing was in many ways not that dissimilar to what the Beatles were doing. It just had a different sound to it, a different result to it, but they were doing exactly the same thing. They were messing.
Yeah.
They took a room and equipment that was designed to capture a performance and nothing else, and turn it into a machine for helping them create new art, which is what we were trying to do as well. And we succeeded. We succeeded to a great degree eventually. I still don't understand how things work in a recording studio that well, but I know that if I explain what I want to hear, I can usually get to that place eventually. It's different now. I think sorry if I'm rambling on. I'm sorry if I'm rambling on.
Take your time.
What's different now, which I'm not keen on, is the fact that it is more about accessing a wealth of stuff that exists as software, rather than coming up with ways to manually create sounds. I mean, we used to do all sorts of shit, put bags over microphones, go next door, hammer walls. But now it's all at your fingertips, and there's no physicality involved in it. There's no, it's there, and you can listen to it or choose it, or listen to it and choose something else. So that the sort of Da Vinci side of it the Da Vinci helicopter side of it has gone away completely. There is none of that now. It's all programs, and it's all sequencing, and it's all there at your fingertips. And it's kind of too easy for me. It's like, nah, that's all right. Nah. What it actually means is that a particular drum kit that you really like, you haven't made that sound, someone else has, you just programmed it. And to a great degree, so has 500 other people. Exactly. So that drum sound that you love is also going to appear on 500 other records equally well, but it sort of flattens the playing field somewhat, you know?
Yeah, well, it seems like nowadays you can just cut and paste an album together with a mouse, and there's no sense of adventure in that, you know? It's just, and yeah, you're using sounds that
there's no soul in it.
No, and it just, we turn on the radio these days, and, you know, I don't want to sound like I'm an old fart, but, you know, it's like half of what I hear, it's just so quickly put together, and there's not a lot of meat on the bone. Nobody knows how to write a bridge anymore, or even bothers. It just seems so immediate, just like get to the chorus and get it over with and give me some money. And you know, there are exceptions, but you know, pop music, pop music has always been slightly, you know, I don't want to say disposable, but it's meant to be, you know, just kind of fun, you know. And but back, you know, in the day,
yeah,
even the simplest or silliest song had great tones on it and unique production. And now that, yeah, it seems like everybody's kind of drinking from the same well, I guess is a good way to put it. And you know, it's, yeah, I totally identify with that. And it seems like the fun and adventure, you know, it's not there. Those people just don't. It's amazing that you can do all this at home, but you know, I think it makes people a little lazy when it should be doing the opposite. And you know, I'm shouldn't whitewash, because there are exceptions, of course, but just a lot of the common productions that you hear on the radio nowadays, it's kind of all seems kind of similar. So I like the more organic approach and listening to records from that period.
I think that's why, I don't know, I think, again, I can only speak for myself, I can't speak for Lol Creme, but I think we were always sort of out of step with everybody else. I think that it's reasonably safe to say that the mainstream audience isn't into looking out for anything particularly different. They consume stuff that they're familiar with and like. So most people make familiar and likable stuff because they know that people will like it.
They don't want to challenge. You don't want to challenge the listener too much. You know, there's a reason McDonald's sold 20 billion hamburgers. And some music is kind of like that.
Yeah, hopefully not to the same guy. Yeah, exactly. I know.
Well, you know, we're a country we're a country of overeaters, so it's possible. You know, that when we were little, mom taught us to finish everything on our plate, but the plate kept growing over the years. You know.
I know. I've eaten in America. I know. So that was always a problem because it's like we always felt. I mean, one hesitates to use the word artists, but we always felt like artists. We didn't feel like we were fulfilling a need for more stuff. We were sort of on a mission to create something that sounded, I guess it's because we were fans of music, right? So if we're talking about music, what would I like to listen to? I've listened to a million soul albums, but I'm not Black and I'm not a soul singer, so we're not going to do that. This is what we do, and we explore. So, and that's interesting. What we just did was really interesting. Maybe some other people will be interested in hearing that. Not as many as we'd like, but sometimes there were. So it was a very hit and miss situation in terms of releasing sound. but fuck of a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. I mean, you know, it's I liken it to painting in a lot of ways. You know, you start with a blank canvas and fill it with color. And you know, and just
Yeah,
being
that's right.
being able to do it
That's
at your leisure in your own studio. I mean, that was a unique thing back then. And you know, the
and the
albums.
great thing was not knowing what you were going to come up with at the end of the day. That was part of it. Now you kind of do. You know, if you press this button, you're going to get that, and okay, and that's going to lead me to this. We, other than the song we were trying to record, we didn't know. You know, we started this particular place, and we're aiming to get to this particular place. I think the thing that was different about the way we recorded music, probably to most people, was that we did it a song at a time. We took a song from the beginning of the recording process to the end of the recording process, as opposed to laying down 12 backing tracks
Right.
and then adding an arrangement to the backing tracks and then throwing some guitar solos out and vocals. We didn't work like that at all. We treated everyone as a separate painting in an exhibition. And we reacted to what we'd done, which meant we had to commit ourselves. If we'd done a backing track that sounded really interesting and we wanted to record a multi-track vocal that had a certain sound on it and it sounded great, we committed ourselves. We mixed that sound into the vocal, as opposed to saying, well, let's just leave that until we mix, because we wanted everything that we did that worked to influence the next thing that we did.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't there, we couldn't do that. So we took a lot of chances, but as you rightly say, we had the time to do that and we had the space to do that. And by the time that Strawberry was sort of 16 and 24 track, we'd had a few hit records and we were left alone to do that.
Yeah.
Probably to a degree because we were miles away from the center of the recording business anyway.
Good point.
But we kind of delivered in our own sort of bizarre way.
Now, when you did the first 10cc album, how many tracks did you have to work with at that point?
I think it was 8.
Okay.
I think it was probably 8 track. I could be wrong, but it feels about right.
Yeah.
It feels about right.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember.
Although it may have been 16.
There's some pictures circulating of the desk there, and it doesn't look like the 4-track. It looks like when you upgraded, the one that kind of wrapped around, kind of, you know, the one I'm referring to.
Well, there was one before that. There was one before that. I know, yeah, the big red one.
Yeah, the big red one. Yeah. How many tracks was that?
Yeah. Fuck knows. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who was counting?
Yeah. Just play.
We used to bounce things down. You know, if we've got some vocals and we needed space, we just bounce them down. I do know that the album was done very quickly. The whole album was done in about 3 weeks, and that was writing and recording.
Wow.
Because I think we'd had a hit by then, and then it was the album time, and we didn't have any material. So, and the interesting thing about that was a turning point, because I think, we may have spoken about this before, but I think it's true of most bands when they start writing and they start recording, they refer to their heroes to a degree, and because there's nothing else to go on, So if the Beatles were like fantastic,
Sure,
there was something Beatley about what we did. But at some point you let go of that and you find, for whatever reason, that you're writing stuff and recording stuff, if you're lucky, that doesn't sound like anything else.
Sure.
And that started to happen on that first 10cc album.
Oh,
There's
I
bad
agree.
stuff on there, like Hospital Song and things like that, that come from the strangest of places.
Sure.
And that was because we had to get shit done, you know.
Right.
Uh, and 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 there it was.
Oh yeah.
um,
Well, I
so
love
that
that batch of
album really
songs.
was important. Yeah, there's some weird stuff on there, isn't there?
Yeah, it is. It's a very unique record. It reminds me a bit of the second record. And it seems like those two have a certain personalities, and then I think original soundtrack is kind of a little different, kind of a little more polished, I guess is how I'd put it. I kind of like the more raw edge of the
Yeah,
first
yeah.
two, and they're a little more eclectic. Um, Now, how were you recording drums back then? How many mics did you use, and what did they mic every piece separately, or did you just hang a couple mics in the air above the kit, or all of the above?
No, no, no. I think it was quite comprehensively made. I think there was a hole in the front skin of the bass drum, the kick drum. And there was a blanket inside, a mic just on the outside. I think all the drums were mic'd separately, with a possible exception of maybe having one drum for the two top toms. Um, but you know, with the usual sort of bits of gaffer tape and pads and stuff on everything. And I don't think I was in a booth. I think I was behind the screen for most of the time. The interesting thing, it was so well mic'd that we discovered that when he recorded a drum track, and it was overnight, maybe 4 or 5 tracks, and he brought the hi-hat up, I was mumbling. I was going, like sort of chanting or something. I don't know. It was the weirdest thing. And it wasn't something that you could kind of get rid of easily. So maybe they had to re-mic from the underneath or something to get rid of this man. But the drum sound they actually got in Strawberry was very tight and dry and simple. There was nothing, there was no boominess, there was a really good sound. I mean, I think we were blessed with Eric's amazing pair of ears. He had a great pair of ears for placing instrumentation and mixing and getting really, really, really good sound. I think we had there was a point where we had the studio, had all the acoustics in the studio changed at some point, probably further down the road, to get it as good as we can. And it was a fucking good studio. I mean, it lasted well beyond the 10cc years.
Mm-hmm.
The next generation of bands coming out of Manchester used it significantly. People like the Mondays and Joy Division and so on and so forth. It was the studio in the north of England. So, you know, I mean, top marks to Eric for that, for having that initial brainwave that it could in fact work.
Sure. Well, some amazing stuff has come out of there. And am I right that it just became kind of very popular? I seem to remember reading in the book that, even when 10cc was ready to make a new record, sometimes Strawberry was booked and they had to create another location. Is that right?
I don't remember recording anywhere else. I don't think we ever recorded
Yeah,
anywhere
that
else.
was
I think
probably
there's a
after
lot of
you guys were out of there, I would imagine. 'Cause
that's possible.
yeah, I want to say
That's
there was like a
possible.
north and a
One
south
thing I do
location.
remember, there was another Strawberry Studios built in Dorking in
Yeah.
Surrey eventually, but that was after Lol and Creme and I had left the band.
Oh,
There was Strawberry South, which was a very high spec studio, and I think that's where the albums were made after we departed. We never actually got to record there, but it was kind of a twin
did
to
you
Strawberry North.
did you miss Strawberry and all of its sounds and such after you and Lol parted ways with 10cc? Did you seek out other studios that were of a similar caliber, or were you just kind of going for convenience?
just trying to think where we did record. We when we made the Consequences project, we recorded that, the bulk of that, at Strawberry, and then recorded some more at the Manor Studios in Oxford. I mean, you know, once you're in the studio, they're all relatively, or they were all relatively similar. It either sounds good or it doesn't, you know. So it wasn't, there was no sentimentality attached to it. Oh, Strawberry. We had fun at Strawberry, though. We played a lot of interesting tricks on people. But where we ended up, because after the Consequences album failed so miserably commercially, we had to kind of have a big reset, think again, start again from scratch, hence the L album.
Yeah,
and that was recorded at a terrific, that was recorded at a little place called Surrey Sound, just outside Leatherhead, which is where Lol lived. It was a great little studio, like 16-track studio, little tiny control room, big live room, above a sort of bunch of shops in a little shopping precinct. But it had a good spirit, had a good vibe about it. And it had something of the spirit of Strawberry. You know, all sorts of people worked there. The Police recorded their first 3 albums there, which is where we first met them. Susie and the Banshees recorded there. Lots of interesting people.
Yeah.
And the guy who ran it, a chap called Nigel Gray, who's now sadly departed, was a police surgeon. That was his day job. And but he engineered and produced the first 3 Police albums. Which is very bizarre.
Great
record. We
records.
had fun. We had a ball. Yeah, we made some really interesting. It was a great sounding space, and he allowed us, you know, the room to fuck around, which kind of brought us a great deal of joy.
I wanted to ask a couple more questions about early days at Strawberry. You know, a lot of folks might not be aware that Neil Sedaka recorded a couple records there. And he seems kind of like an unlikely participant, you know. How did he wind up in England there, of all places, with you as his backing band?
Yeah, it still mystifies the hell out of me. I'm only surmising, but I think what he wanted to do, a good friend of his, Carole King, had had a huge amount of success with that very stripped down sound.
Yeah, Tapestry and all that.
Yeah, exactly. All great records, and he wanted to do something like that, go back to basics. And I guess he must have met our manager or Graham at some point, and they got talking, and the studio was mentioned, and I think we had a little bit of. What year are we talking here? What period of time?
You know, I'd have to break out the
this
record.
was before 10cc.
Yeah,
this was before 10cc.
So 1971-ish, somewhere around there.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd done some interesting production work as a production team up to that point. I think, yeah, we'd done a few different strange projects, and we were known as a production team and a house band at that particular point. So he wanted to try and work with us. And we actually got on extremely well. And it was refreshing for us, because the nature of the beast was that we just wanted to play, and he wanted us to play, essentially be his band. So there was less production, less sort of brain work involved, and more sitting down and playing.
Yeah.
Which was great fun.
You know, there's one particular song out of those sessions that became a huge hit for another group. You know, probably know the one I'm talking about. Love Will Keep Us Together, which was a huge hit in 1975 for the Captain to Neil. I was just curious, when you were, did you ever have any inkling that that song could be so big? in a different context.
Well, there was something about all of his songs. I mean, Solitaire's a great song. I mean, all the stuff that he wrote in that period had a bit of fairy dust on it. Uh, but what was strange is that the process he used to record was different to anything any of us had experienced before. He would play piano and sing at the same time, but he would always sing the harmony part first and then add the lead vocal on top, which was kind of weird,
Yeah, who
but
does
it
that?
worked.
That's
Nobody. Well, he does. Oh, he did.
yeah, just being able to hear that and nail that first is kind of an interesting talent.
Yeah, it is. But it was a great time. It was like being a band. It was like being a band, and what actually came out of those two sessions, those two albums, rather, was Neil saying to us, "Why don't you guys be a band?" The thought had never occurred to us up until that point. So he and those two albums were the joint catalyst that decided us to try doing our own stuff.
Well,
Um,
thank you, Neil.
Thank you, Neil. Yeah, exactly. And we thought, it's a sort of little light bulb went off, and we thought, well, okay, let's come in one evening and try something. So we started writing, and we tried something,
Do you
and
remember?
that was kind of the.
Do you remember what was the
So
first song that you all wrote together as a team?
I think it was called Waterfall,
Okay.
and it was like a sort of Crosby, Stills, Nash harmony thing. Um, and we thought we might get an opportunity to release it through Apple Records. So we sent it to Apple, but they knocked it back. They didn't want to release it. So we just kept, but we were into it by then. And we thought, well, okay, well, we'll try somewhere else, but we should record a B-side for it just in case somebody else picks it up. And so we recorded a song called Donna.
Sure.
Well, and I wrote that in about half an hour and recorded
Kind of
that. And that,
kind of a 50s pastiche, not unlike another one on the
yeah,
record,
do it.
Johnny Don't Do It. There's,
Yeah. Well, Johnny didn't do it in the end, but Donna did.
yeah.
And it was a number 2 hit in the UK.
Was
So,
was Johnny basically the same story of Johnny Angel and just how he wound up getting offed? Is that the same Johnny? Was it
kind of.
inspired by Johnny Angel?
I think there was a glut of those songs. There was a song that I remember called "Tell Laura I Love Her" that was fantastic, and they were kind of banned, those songs, back then. They had a bit of Jeopardy attached to them. They were sort of controversial, about a teenager who would do things like that, stock
Yeah.
car racing and motorcycles, and teenagers were bad,
Oh
and,
yeah.
and
Those
so we
rebellious
were,
kids.
yeah, rebellious kids, bad boys, um, and we got. I think what was happening to us around that time was there was a satirical element to what we were about that was starting to come through. We were kind of satirizing those kind of songs in a way.
Oh yeah.
Uh, and that's something, there's an element of twisted humor about it. And this sort of stuck to us like glue throughout the 10cc years. And
Yeah. Yeah,
I think those two, yeah, that was our first sort of tilt in that direction.
I
But
think
yeah, I mean, but we made the Fatal Error. Fatal Error, Donna was a big hit. So, ding, we'll do something just like Donna.
okay.
It's not going to work for us like that.
No.
Um, but Johnny Don't Do It. It's quite good fun.
Yeah, that's just kind of a
But
favorite. I played it for a friend of mine named Johnny, and he was like, "That's rather morbid, don't you think?" And I'm like, "That's the beauty of it." And
Yes,
So
it was morbid, morbidism. Yeah,
yeah, but I like the twist on the typical teen saga from the 50s. It's like the dark side of it.
yeah, it was. Yeah, it was like something out of Greece. Yeah,
Yeah, what
thinking about it now.
exactly? Except that the brakes didn't work. It's like
Yeah,
whoops.
exactly. As they
Exactly.
often don't in those kind of songs.
Yeah. Do you remember anything about the way they recorded guitars back at Strawberry? Remember, was it like, were they miking
Most,
amps or were they just plugging straight into the desk or a little of each?
yeah, a bit of each, but mostly straight into the desk.
It sounds like it. And
Because, yeah, mostly straight into the desk, occasionally through some effects, but mostly straight into the desk because you were playing to that big sound, coming out through the speakers, and there's nothing better. It's so different than being in the live space wearing a set of cans.
yeah, good
We did
point.
that occasionally when we were all playing together, but if we were overdubbing, guitars would mostly be done in the control room, as
Yeah,
with keyboards.
I could tell just some of the tones and textures sound very direct, which was pretty
Mm.
rare for back in those days. And I also hear some kind of very speed things going on where it sounds like they recorded it fast or slow and then played it back at normal speed. Like
Yeah,
there's an instrumental on the first album. I forget what it's called, but there's a lot of that high kind of squiggly sped up guitar in there, and it gives it a really unique flavor. I think the only other place I ever heard it was on Zappa's Uncle Meat album. And
yeah. I think that is quite prominent on Rubber Bullets as well.
it
Actually,
is, yeah. I mean,
there is
it's
a double speed guitar part all the way through that.
yeah. That I guess you'd call it a guitar solo. The doo 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 doo. Yeah, that whole thing with the kind of a
Yeah,
fuzz.
but that's
Yeah,
yeah.
I just
I
love
mean,
that. Just it makes listening to those records so fun because there's just so much ear candy tucked in there.
yeah,
That's how
exactly.
I'd put it.
But again, it was just because we were in the control room. Let's try. What happens if we slow it down and play? And what does it sound like? It sounds like that. Well, that seems to fit. So let's do more of that then.
Yeah, that's a great
Did
sound.
you see? Yeah, but did you watch that series called? I think it was called. I don't know, about Paul McCartney recently. I think it was on. I think it was on Disney Plus. Um, I think it was called 321.
Yeah,
One,
the
two,
one with
three.
Rick
Where
Rubin. Yeah, I saw the
yeah,
first episode, and I think my favorite part is just when Paul sat down at the piano and started going tink, 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 and he's like, this is where it all starts, and then you elaborate
yeah,
and add your boogie woogie bass line, and
yeah,
that was my favorite part of the show, just kind of getting a little insight
yeah.
into his creative process.
But didn't you? The thing I got from watching it, which for me was the most exciting thing, probably was it took me back to understanding that nothing was precious. We were all in our own ways, just fucking around trying to make something come to life, and that's kind of what we were doing. As I just said, let's try slowing the tape machine down and playing to it. Well, that's nice. We'll have a bit of that.
Sure.
And it was the fact that we didn't know what that would do, and then we tried it, and it did that, and we liked it, and we kept it. That it was that excitement of jumping in at the deep end continuously, knowing that it was a safe place to be, but not always as safe as some people would like. It was a playground. It was
Uh,
an audio playground, and suddenly, well, not suddenly, but anything was possible.
yeah.
Anything was possible.
What was
Whether
your
it worked
approach?
or not was a different thing.
What was your approach to tracking vocals? Did you all just gather around one mic and do all the harmonies and everything at one time, or was it more kind of one by one?
It was one by one when it came to lead vocals. There was a very democratic approach because regardless of who'd written the song, the thing was, well, who's got the right voice to sing this song? It's never, well, I wrote it, I'm going to sing it. That wasn't the thing at all. So we'd each go into the studio to try our hand at singing a particular vocal for a song, and off Graham would go and try it, and then, you know, we'd hold up scorecards out of 10, like they do for ice skating, and then, you know, invariably the one would just say next. So out Graham would go, and I'd go in, or Lol or out would go in, and eventually it would become obvious who was to sing the main part of a particular song. But when it came to backing vocals, it could be any combination. Usually if Eric was in the control room engineering, it would be the three of us or the two of us, or one of us would go in a multi-track. We just try any combination until we all felt it made sense.
Sure. And that would that come with the way you stack the harmonies as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. There was no real rhyme or reason or set pattern
Yeah. Okay.
of doing things. So everything we just did that we liked would suggest maybe what we should try next.
Sure. Well, you know, there's a lot of
Uh,
different ways to approach stacking those harmonies. You know, you listen to like the way the Beach Boys did it versus Queen. It's quite different, and the end result is different, but it's still a harmony
yeah,
vocal. Yeah, you know,
yeah,
just try it all out. Um,
I
I was
know.
wondering if we could talk a bit about some album covers and kind of get your thoughts and memories on how some of them came together. And I've got to put together a little slideshow to
Okay,
kind of give people something to look at as we do this. So hold on, let me enable screen sharing and we'll take a peek here. All right, there you are. Do you remember where this picture was taken at? Looks fairly recent.
that's a fairly recent one.
Yeah.
It's fairly recent. It doesn't.
Yeah.
No. Try to see what's in the background. No, I don't. It looks like it was taken in the past few years.
Yeah, I thought it was fairly
But
recent.
do you know where it was taken?
I
Do you
don't
know where
really
it was
know.
taken?
I just kind of dug around until
No.
I found one that was clear and big. You know. So anyhow,
That's me.
that's you.
It's not. It's not. It looks like some kind of trellis or something behind this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've no idea. It was. It's. I don't know. Can't place it.
Well,
Not
anyhow.
a bad picture though.
So I thought we'd start with your album, Muscle Memory, which I highly suggest if anyone
Yeah.
has not checked it out. And
Okay.
I was kind of curious about the background on this particular piece of artwork. Some of the artwork with this album reminded
Yeah.
me a bit of what you did on the box set for Godley and Cream. These kind of collages and
Yeah. I'm
cutouts and
very.
such. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm into collage. I'm very into collage. Um, Before I got into the design element of all the stuff that, or the booklet on the cover, after having spoken to the label, I came to a decision, we came to a joint decision that any of the elements that would go up to make a collage would have to be original material. Otherwise, it becomes complicated to get clearances and everything. So all the elements of this particular collage were taken by me over a period of a couple of years leading up to the album. The top is a view of some trees, obviously, and the ears are the end bits of. Actually, keep it up, then I can refer
Yeah.
to
Hold
it.
on. Yeah. Hang on.
The end bits, the ears are. Yeah.
I was having a bit of technical difficulty. Give me just a moment here. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Hold on. Sorry about that. It was kind of out of kilter there. So let me try this one more time.
Okay. Edit point.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that'll have to do.
That's the one. That's the one.
Yeah.
So the ears is just a tray that I photographed. Um, the eyes are a couple of vitamin pills. The nose is a medication that I was on at the time. The mouth was a stain on a floor that I saw. That I just noticed that looked vaguely like lips. So I photographed it for no other reason that it looked interesting. And it was just one of those photographs that I had in my collection. And all those elements seemed to come together. I mean, there were probably maybe 3 or 4 different versions of that, but that version just had something for me. And it also, in a very peculiar way, reminds me of a photograph of me when I was very young at school. Because I had kind of sticky out ears and hair, a bit like that. So it seemed appropriate somehow. I still like it. I think it works quite well.
Yeah, and there's other interesting collages within the album as well. So it's very interesting visual.
Yeah, the same process. Thank you. I mean, it was the same process throughout. Really, it was a matter of either finding photographs of mine that existed, digital photographs, or taking photographs and choosing bits of them. And they're all very crudely put together. There was no sort of cutting out, rotoscoping around the edge of any shape. So there were always either oblong pictures or square pictures, and put together quite simply. But that was exciting for me. I kind of enjoyed being part of the design process. I was also partly involved in those little sort of animated clips they put up on YouTube for each track.
Yeah.
I was working with the label's art department, and I was sort of just throwing ideas at them, and we kind of knocked them backwards and forwards and developed them. But the sort of the collage thing is something that I'm sort of stuck with. I don't know, there's just something about collage, and this kind of collage that really I find exciting to look at.
Yeah, well, I think it works really well.
So I've continued, thank you. So I've kind of continued to do that, even though I've got nothing to apply to, but I will have.
Well, I like your style with it. I think it's really very interesting. Okay,
Thank you.
So we're going to go way back here with this one. Now, am I right that Lol drew this?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, this is really, I mean, don't forget that both Lol and I were art college students. So this is the backstory, if you like.
Yeah.
This is where our interest in all things visual comes from. And Lol was always into cartoons and animation. I think, back when he was a kid, he wanted to work for Disney. And this is very kind of sort of almost punk Disney.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, it sort of set the tone. I'm not sure about the one.
Yeah.
It's very phallic.
Yeah. Now that you mentioned it, yes.
Wouldn't be allowed to do that today. I don't think. Yeah. But no, it's great. It's great. It's perfect for who we were at that moment in time.
Well, yeah, you could.
And again, I think it was kind of thrown together quickly because we didn't have a design and we didn't have a designer. Yeah. And we could do it, so he did that, and it worked.
What do you think the bomb symbolizes? The explosion that the world is about to experience with 10cc?
I don't think it symbolizes anything, but if you want to put something on it, that it's like, okay, well, maybe it's sort of something that looks kind of fun and silly, but right in the middle is something a bit darker that's going to blow everything sky high, maybe.
Well, that's
and
kind
that
of,
paint oozing out in front,
that's
of it
kind of you guys in
is
a
going to
nutshell.
splash you right in the face.
So yeah,
Yeah,
very,
it could be.
yeah.
And I think that's a little drawing pin next to the
Oh,
next to the zero,
that could pop the
just on the
balloons.
right. It's a little drawing pin. So yeah, it could be.
Okay.
And there's another one. I've never analysed it before.
Okay. Well, I was hoping we could go a few new places here. So thank you. And how about
Okay.
the follow up? Now, this seems a little more artsy. Were you working with Hipgnosis on this one yet?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that was,
I mean, they were, Hipgnosis were an extraordinary team. They, in many ways, Storm and Poe, those two guys were the sort of design equivalent of rock stars. They were kind of like Godley and Creme when we were video makers.
yeah.
They were sort of rock star designers, and everybody wanted to have their album cover designed by them. And so we did. I seem to remember what the process was. They'd show up with a number of different ideas in rough form, and they'd say that they preferred this one, and we 9 times out of 10 say, yeah, that's really cool, go for it. And we'd show up and we'd be photographed or whatever it was that they wanted us to do. We had
Did you
virtually
ever
no
did you
input.
did you ever guide them before the fact, saying, "Here, this is kind of what we think we'd like to have," or did you just let them do whatever they
No,
wanted?
pretty much let them do whatever they want.
Okay.
It's a very strange thing. But as soon as 10cc began to be successful, any pretensions that Lol and I had about doing design or art or anything visual for the band went out the window. It was not a part of our thought process then at all, which mystifies me to this day, but it just didn't. We were 100% focused on music, and we left all this stuff to other people. And this is a great example, but I guess we had an opinion if things were working or not, but we would never say, no, well, this record isn't about that kind of thing, it should be this. And, no, I look shit and he looks great, I want to be at the front. There was none of that sort of,
Okay.
none of that muscling in to the ideas, because they were very good.
Sure.
They were very good. All the stuff that they did for us was very good.
Now, this setting, is this an actual building you were in, or is it more of a cut and paste kind of situation? And if so, do you
No,
remember where
it was.
this
I
was?
think it was a. No, I know what it was. It was a cinema
Okay.
um, with a sort of Art Deco foyer.
Yeah.
I believe, I forget where it was, but it's in London probably somewhere. So no, it's not a composite. It was a place.
Okay. No, I think it's my favorite 10cc cover. There's just something about it
Yeah, it's very striking, isn't it?
it really is, and I think the yellow really sets it off too. Um,
Yeah, me too.
Compared to this one, now black and white films from the heyday, I would think inspired the kind of the idea for this one. Is that right?
Well, I mean, Lol and I were sort of frustrated filmmakers for a long time. And just going back to what I said, we didn't do any design work or film work, but we translated that frustration into music. And if I'm not mistaken, I think there's a song called One Night in Paris on the original soundtrack.
Oh
Is
yeah,
that correct?
yeah. The little epic. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was a film in sound.
Sure.
This drawing was done by an artist called Humphrey Ocean. Um, and he is a superb draftsman, and this is a superb piece of drawing. I don't remember the center being slightly colored as the one you showed me here, but it was. I know there were various versions of it, but it was that classic sense of skill and drawing and art, and of course the subject matter, which seemed perfect for the sort of slightly cinematic scope of this particular record. Again, it was. I imagine Storm particularly went through a similar process that we eventually did when we were trying to come up with music video ideas. We'd listen and we'd let what we were listening to inspire us. So I hope that's what happened with the album sleeves.
Sure.
And this seems to work particularly well for this record.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. Very, very nice one. And then this is probably a little more along the lines of Hipgnosis's mid-70s albums. It reminds me a bit of Wish You Were Here from Pink Floyd, where they're shaking hands with it. There's a sense of kind of humor and irony visually working in here, not unlike Wish You Were Here from Pink Floyd, or, there's a number of whimsical ones. And this one in particular.
There's a number of stories going on. The stories going on, you don't know what the stories are. But there's lots of fun going through the cover on the inside gatefold, trying to figure out what the hell is going on.
Well, it's like how. It's like somebody's offended on each side, one way or another, about something.
Yeah,
is what
someone's offended or someone's offending. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because it seems like
are they talking to each other, or are they talking to two separate people?
Yeah, well, it seems like he's like reminding her what a lazy drunk she is and how she needs to, get out and get a job or something. and
exactly. But he doesn't know that she just got out of bed with somebody else.
Right, yeah.
Or whatever. You can paste anything on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
love the hair. Love his hair.
Oh, yeah. And then the backside, I find as amusing as the front, and this is probably the side that people don't see quite as often, but the lurid phone call to the stewardess.
I've forgotten about that. Dirty old man making a phone call to an air hostess.
Yeah, covered up the receiver with the handkerchief, like that's going to make a difference.
Yeah.
Now, do you remember?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you remember doing the inside photo shoot?
Yeah, it was chaos.
Yeah, who are all these people?
But great fun. Where am I? Probably at the back.
I think you are over here.
There I am.
Yes.
About 5 in from the left. Yeah. It's great. I mean, I think it's terrific.
Yeah, who were all?
It's just so weighted.
Yeah.
There's a lot of weight in it because you are intrigued as to who's talking to who and what may or may not be going on. It's a shame it wasn't sound with it.
Yeah. Now, were these all just models and such? It almost looks like the blonde from the cover is passed out here on the right here on the sofa. Like she's finally had one too many, and
could well be.
Yeah.
I think they were all probably picked out of a book. No one's acting; they're just posing. So
yeah.
I have no idea where this was shot. Obviously, a location somewhere. I don't think it was done in a studio.
Yeah.
It looks like it was done at a location. You're really going back, aren't you, with this stuff?
Oh, yeah, a bit. But just sitting here with my record collection, I've seen them all many times, and
yeah,
you spend 45 minutes looking at the sleeve while you listen to the record sometimes.
Yeah,
which I
yes, you do. You do.
If they recreated this today, there'd be a lot less chords. It'd be all cell phones.
There'd be no chords.
Yeah, I know.
No chords. Yeah, that's very true.
It wouldn't be as good, I don't think. Okay.
No.
Yeah. Moving on. Tell me a bit about this. I think people have speculated about what it is. Can you enlighten us?
Yeah. When we were making, we started making this album at Strawberry Studios, and the first probably 2/3 of the album was made there. And they had a room, I think it was a tape store, between the control room and reception, and we used to go in there, and we were trying to visualize to ourselves what the music was saying. Probably because we were pretty stoned most of the time. We felt that what we were doing was kind of important. What idiots. But this was kind of we were jumping back into our art school days. And we started to make things. I mean, a few of them are actually in the booklet that goes with the record. But this was one made out of, it was made on glass, and it was cotton wool. Yeah, it was cotton wool. The cloud formation, which is what it kind of is, was made of cotton wool, stuck to glass, with a light bulb behind it and a black sheet behind the whole thing. That's all it is.
Cotton balls?
But sorry?
You said cotton balls? Is that right?
Cotton wool, yeah, cotton wool.
Cotton wool.
Not
Okay.
cotton balls, but cotton wool. Cotton wool used to come in a sort of bag that you can pull bits out. We would pull bits out and mold it and stick it to a piece of glass till it made this kind of strange face on cloud formation. We left a place for the eye and we put a light bulb behind it. And that's just a photograph of what we did. There was another one that was a wave that was made from candle wax, dripping candle wax on glass.
Oh yeah, it does. It kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah, and we had a lot of fun doing all that stuff.
Yeah.
We had a lot of fun doing all that stuff. It was great.
Well, this is funny, but a gentleman that I've interviewed on my show a few times before, a friend of mine, Mark Bonilla, who played with Keith Emerson most recently, he actually has a bass with this art on it. So he's a huge fan of this album.
Oh, really?
He put the face on his bass. Yeah.
It does have its fans. It does.
Yeah, definitely does.
Yeah. It does have its. That's how we did that. We were sort of making images that we thought would kind of show what we were doing with sound, because there was very few instances on the album where lyrics were that prominent. So it was mostly an instrumental album. So this was, I guess, these images were instead of lyrics to us at the time.
You want to see something rather funny? I picked up a copy of this at the used record store a while back, and when I opened it up, I found the original receipt from 1979 in it, and I still have it here. Remember when this credit card slips look like that? Yeah. So this gentleman paid $25.76 in February of 1979, and his name was Henry Selinger, and he bought it at Peaches Records in Atlanta, Georgia. So, yeah, we're going way back there.
How cool is that?
So that's what it retailed for back in the day, which isn't bad for a big box set. That's a good price.
Back then it was. It didn't help our cause back then.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm still glad you made this record. It's an adventure.
I'm glad I got to sing with Sarah Vaughan. So
I mean, can you share a few memories of that session with us?
Yes. No. I didn't actually sing at the same time as Sarah. I'd already recorded my vocals, and because the thought of us doing it together was too terrifying. So I'd already recorded my vocals. She showed up at the Manor, resplendent in a sort of powder blue trouser suit and hat, and was absolutely delightful. and we sort of stood around the piano and rehearsed it a few times until she felt comfortable, and then we just went for it, and she nailed it in probably about 3 takes, if that. And what a voice! I mean, you know, my performance sort of shrivels next to hers. But it was it's one of those treasured moments, you know.
I can imagine. Just was she just on a wish list where you're like, oh, Sarah Vaughan would be perfect for this, and you had some connections that made it happen?
We were after either Sarah Vaughan or Ella Fitzgerald, because we felt that the sort of mood of the song, it was almost a sort of Gershwin mood, a sad Gershwin song.
Sure.
And so we were looking for a voice that would fit. And Ella Fitzgerald wasn't free, but Sarah Vaughan was free, and she liked the song and agreed to sing. So we were in hog heaven, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's a wonderful moment. So you guys scaled things back a little bit on the next record.
Just a bit.
Yeah. This one probably didn't
Do you
take
know
as
what
long
that
to record.
is?
Yeah. And
Do you know
as
what that is?
you told me last time that this is basically what they put on your car in England when you're learning, like a learner's permit, kind of like, look out, I don't drive very well, so
Exactly.
you know, you never know what to expect when
Yes.
you pass me. Yeah.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Precisely.
You know, there's
Um,
a lot of xylophone on the Godley and Cream material. Did you play it?
yeah.
So,
We both did, but I played a lot of it. But there were relatively simple parts. I'd sort of, you know, chalk the numbers on the actual notes. So I know this would be the first one I'd hit, and that'd be the second one I'd hit. So I was reading it. I was reading music written on the actual instrument, if you like, but I'd never played. I think it was marimba rather than xylophone.
you're right. Yeah,
There
definitely
was
wooden.
not a huge amount of difference, but yeah, it was just part of what we were doing. I think the first time we used it was on a song called "An Englishman in New York." And I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
it's playing in
exactly. Yeah, come to
marimba on
think of it,
that.
it's not on L. It crops up on the next record, which we'll talk about here
No,
now. Yeah, freeze frame.
but yeah, I mean this particular album, Al is probably Al and Freeze Frame were the 2 favorite Godley and Cream albums of mine. I think Al because
Mine as well.
yeah, it was starting again with a different kind of a different canvas. A lot had happened since Consequences. Punk, new wave, the horizon was blasted way open now. And I remember when we were recording Consequences and punk happened, I was dead jealous. I was thinking, shit, why are we doing this stuff? You know, this is much more invigorating. But of course, you know, we were in the wrong place at the wrong time doing what we did. There was no way we could change. I don't think Lol would have wanted to anyway. So, but it was incredibly exciting to see the way the tectonic plates were shifting around about that time. So when it came to do this, it allowed us to go in lots of different directions at once. We didn't have to be. We could lighten up a little bit. We could try things that we never dared try before because we didn't think they'd suit us, but now we could somehow.
There's some really interesting tones and textures on here. Like there's some really kind of abrasive acoustic guitar on Sandwiches of You that
Yeah.
it's like hard telling how you did that, but I've never heard a tone quite like that on anybody else's record.
I think what we did for Sandwiches of You, as well as recording the guitar in the control room, we actually mic'd up the strings.
Ah.
You know, had a mic right next to the strings, so we were getting that harsh strumming sound straight off the strings as opposed to through the pickups. and the speakers. It was just the strings adding that cheese grater thing to
Yeah,
them.
love that. That really makes it stand out.
Yeah, that worked really well.
Now, is some of this album sort of semi-autobiographical?
Yeah.
So say Art
Um,
School
Punch.
Canteen obviously was a place that you hung out back in the day.
Yeah, that's right. Art School Canteen. Is there a song on there called Punch Bag?
There
Is
is,
there a
yes.
song on there called Business is Business? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were. That was something that we'd never done before. Most of our lyrics were kind of looking at something else that was nothing to do with us, or conjuring stories or creating fictions. But this, it just felt, that just kind of slid in there.
Yeah.
And as most things, you try stuff, and if they work, they stay. You know, if they don't work, you move on and try something else. But in this instance, they seem to fit with this new way of doing things. There was a lot of loops used in this record. I think Sandwiches of You, there's quite a complex series of loops going on, which forms the basic rhythm track for that song. It's quite complicated instrumentally, if I remember.
Absolutely. It reminds me a bit of Zappa at times. I was curious if he was an influence when it came to arranging and the use of the marimba and all that.
Yeah, he was. I mean, the sort of more oblique, atonal Zappa, if anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he was an influence, not necessarily that consciously, but that kind of jarring thing was going on a lot. And now, and again, we did this at Sorry Sound, and it was great. It was we tried all manner of experiments and had a ball doing it.
Yeah, well, it's quite an awesome album, and it seems like it hangs really well with Freeze Frame. They seem like they're kind of cut from a similar cloth, somewhat. So how
Yeah,
did Englishman in New York?
that
Sorry about that.
yeah.
How did Englishman in New York
This
come
that was
together?
yeah. Uh, Probably reminiscences from our trips to America. The last one being probably before this album was made was probably around about Consequences time, because the Gizmo, or the Gizmotron, as it eventually became known, was manufactured as a product in Flushing, I think it was, New York.
Yeah.
And we've been on a sort of whistle-stop tour of America, both promoting the album Consequences and going to the manufacturing plant there. And this is probably born out of our memories of New York more than anything else, and the ludicrous contrasts of a place that is that big and that dense and that extraordinary. There's a lot of strange visual clashes in the lyrics of An Englishman in New York. Of course, it's always confused with Sting's song of the same name.
True.
But
An artist
the
that you've worked
content is
with.
very different. It's very different.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
I was just going to say before that is a Hipgnosis cover.
Oh, it is. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
kind of a giraffe pattern on humans. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, one of
Nicely
my
done, I must say.
one of my favorite songs on this one is the closer, "Get Well Soon." I was wondering if you
Yeah.
could share a few memories of listening to Radio Luxembourg as a young lad.
Radio Luxembourg was sort of a magic portal to a world of music that you didn't normally hear on the radio in England. Radio Luxembourg, I guess, was sort of the precursor of the pirate radio. You could turn, if you could actually tune the dial well enough to find Luxembourg and hold it in that place, some really interesting music would come your way. And I remember listening to it a lot when I'd get the old cold and I wasn't able to go to school, or I got the flu, or I had measles, or whatever you had in those days. And you'd be lying in bed and you listen to Radio Luxembourg to hear what was really going on in the rest of the world musically. But one of the coolest things about that track is that we've got Paul McCartney singing backing vocals on it.
Yeah, yeah. How did that transpire?
We asked him, and he said, "Yeah."
Right. Yeah.
So
Now, am I right?
You
Am I
could
right
do
that
that kind of thing in those days.
you kind of knew him already? Didn't he like record like an album for his brother at Strawberry Sounds a few years earlier?
Yeah. At Strawberry, he was doing the night shift. We were working during the day, and he'd come in sort of around about 8, 9 o'clock, and we kind of switch over. We'd clock out, and he'd clock in with Mike, and they record at night. So, and there was, banter, and we get to know each other, and we'd play him what we were doing, and he'd play us what they'd been doing. So, yeah, we knew him, and we got on really well. So he just showed up and did some stuff.
Yeah.
So it doesn't get better than that.
No, no, definitely not. And it's just a great way to end the record. It kind of just fades off, almost like you're falling asleep after listening to your little AM radio under the covers.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
kind of woozy, isn't it? It's kind of woozy, and there's these kind of clanking, tuned cowbells
yeah.
that take you all the way through. It's a very, it feels like you're on meds when you listen to it.
As it was meant to be. Yes. And also,
Yeah,
you have Phil Manzanera from Roxy Music on here. I take it he was a good
yeah,
friend, and was he living close? I think,
yeah.
yeah, I had him on my show, and I think he mentioned that he lived just a few doors down at the time. Is that right?
That's right. We were neighbours.
Mm,
He lived up the hill.
yeah,
Um, yeah, because we were contemporaries, and we liked Roxy music, and we liked what Phil's solo projects, and we started playing together, and so he guested uh, on our stuff, and we guested on some of his stuff. Um, a very interesting player, a very individual player,
very
not
much. Yeah. You know, he's
not very very
he's about a lot about his playing is about texture, and I don't think
very much
a
so.
textural guitarist could have happened 10 years earlier. It was kind of the invention of a lot of effects that kind of allowed guys to just hit one chord and let it ring. And
Yeah,
Andy Summers from the Police is another. He's like the dean of the textural mindset when it comes to guitar players, I think. And
absolutely. And the Edge is another one again.
I love that.
It's like a school of thought. Me
It's
too.
almost like the guitar doesn't quite sound like a guitar, and that's a good thing. It's like it's
Yeah,
kind of putting it in a new context, and for an instrument that's been around that
I
long.
always know when it's Phil. I always know when it's Phil playing. It's not just texture. It's a style. It's an approach. I can always tell when it's Phil.
Oh yeah, yeah, great, and he's still doing great stuff. He did a recent album with Tim Finn, who he's worked with on and off since the '70s, and it's really good
Tim
stuff.
Finn,
Really good stuff. Yeah, if you remember from
Split Ends.
yeah, Split Ends, the Australian band, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
great stuff. Um, okay, so this one, not much to talk about here, at least visually. Pretty simple. Yeah, is this the one that has Under My
Yeah,
Thumb?
I think it does. This album cover, incidentally, I don't know if it means anything to you, but the album cover was designed by a friend of ours called Ben Kelly. Ben Kelly designed the legendary and iconic nightclub in Manchester called the Hacienda. I don't know if that rings any bells.
Mm,
No, okay.
no, but
Those who don't know, but he designed this album cover for us. those are all little tiny holes punched in the original version of the album cover.
Oh, I get it.
Those on the word ismism was those were holes punched in the actual cover, and the color was provided by the inner sleeve.
Oh, I see. Because from here, it almost looks like it could be rivet heads or something. You know.
Yeah,
Yeah. And is ismism. What was the inspiration for the
yeah.
title?
It just sounded interesting. I mean, I think we've recently discovered the Linn drum machine, and we were messing around with synthesizers, and we were modernizing. We were getting into the current technology and finding out what we could do to fuck that up
Right.
in
Yep.
traditional Godley Creme fashion.
Was this when
And
was this when you were laid up with your back issues?
yeah,
Okay.
I think
So
it was.
it was the use of the modern electric drums out of necessity, or do you think you probably would have gone there even if your back hadn't given you problems?
It was always difficult. I mean, by this time we were recording at a studio that we put in at Lol's house because Surrey Sound was too busy. We couldn't get in. So we bought some gear and set it up in what was originally Lol's art room. So we had our own little setup. And there wasn't a great deal of room for a kit in there. So it was part necessity, but part interest.
Okay.
Before the Linn drum machine, I had a thing that was like a suitcase, which was a series of maybe 4 or 5 pads, black plastic circular pads that had one specific sound. But the Linn drum machine was pretty revolutionary at the time, and we started to move from one to the other. And I think my fingers were the only thing that worked on my entire body at the time. I couldn't even laugh, so singing was problematic. But we got shit done, and this was
Yeah.
a fun album to do.
Well, it's like you almost approach kind of a rap style on some of these things, and what you just said
Yeah, it's
kind of shines light on why you maybe weren't singing in full voice at the time.
it's difficult to sing on your back.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Uh, they had to mic me up, but it was a fun record to do. Again, it was something different, I guess.
Yeah, well,
Um,
keep pushing
I think
forward. That's the way to do it. Can you
we
tell me a bit
do. We had
about
to. If we didn't, that wouldn't have been pleasurable.
under your thumb, not under my thumb? That's the Stones song.
Yeah,
But what was the
yeah,
inspiration for that? Kind of sounds like a ghost of a lady on a train is kind of what I'm gathering from it.
yeah. That's what it turned out to be. But how it came about was interesting. I think Lola just discovered how to sequence stuff. Um, so I showed up at his house in the morning, and he'd been messing around all night. He played with this thing that he'd done, which was essentially the backing track for Under Your Thumb, which was this thing kind of rocketing along at a very fast pace. It was great. I started singing to it, and probably within about 10 minutes came up with the chorus. Don't want to sing along. I was inspired by it. I want to be on the other. And as most lyrical ideas progress, this one progressed in the same way. What the hell are we talking about? I don't know, but it could be about this. So let's follow that line of thought. And it did. It became a kind of ghost story.
Yeah.
Quite atmospheric. But again, it's there's no process. There's no well, you do this first, and then that leads you to that. It's what comes. It's magic, that kind of stuff. When that happens, it's magic,
Yeah. Yeah. I love
and
it.
it's difficult to quantify because you're sculpting air. You know.
Yeah. I love it. Love it. This is a little different, a little risque.
Yes, that's a little different.
What's the story behind
It
this?
is a little different. I don't know, that album cover sort of reflects the slightly twisted and darker vision um, for this particular record. I think around about this time we were losing it a bit. I think by now we were getting into music video a little bit. What year was this? Do you know?
Um, Let me think. I want to say 1983-ish, 82,
Okay.
somewhere around there.
Well, if that's the case, we were probably in a transition period because making records wasn't our day job anymore.
At that point,
Our
yeah.
day job was shooting music video, which was a whole new world for the first time in our lives. We've been at the beginning of something, right? So, and for whatever reason, we found ourselves as part of a vanguard designing something that didn't exist yet,
Yeah.
which was thrilling. And that took up a lot of thought, that took up a lot of time. So making a record wasn't as exciting as it had been before.
I can
And I
see
don't,
that. Sure,
this record was interesting, but it was a little bit dour. It was a little bit
yeah,
darker than stuff we've done before.
yeah,
Some
yeah,
interesting things on it.
yeah, definitely.
But a lot of it, I think, was just done to a sequence or a loop or something. I
Yeah,
don't
it
think
seems a
we
bit more.
plowed as much energy.
Yeah, it seems rather sparse compared to, say, Freeze Frame or L. A little.
It is. I think you can sense that something has changed, and maybe our attention span wasn't as full on as it had been for
Yeah.
previous records. Um, I don't think there was a hit record on this album, was there? I don't think
No,
so.
I don't think so. Was Wedding Bells on this one,
No,
maybe? Uh, so it
I
might
don't
have had a
know.
hit.
I don't know.
Yeah, I'd have to
I don't
let me
know.
break it out and double check, but the follow up is one of my favorites. Goodbye Blue Sky, and
Yeah,
when I first heard about it, I thought an album based around harmonica, how good could that be? And I was, thinking of Bob Dylan wheezing away on one of his, and it was so much more than that. Once I got a hold of it, it's like you used harmonicas in fresh and inventive ways I don't think anybody ever had used them before. And the you know lyrically and otherwise, it's
I think
it's
the
one of your better
inspiration
ones.
for this.
Yeah,
It is, although it didn't go down particularly well. Didn't sell particularly well. Um, I think the idea of doing it, I remember, I think there was a Paul Simon track called The Boxer. I don't know if it's
sure, yeah, yeah.
from
La-di
this
lie, la-di la da 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 da. Yeah,
time.
that one.
There's a track called The Boxer that features a bass. Yeah.
Oh
But
yeah,
then
right.
when we heard it,
Okay.
it was like, oh, that's kind of, remember that?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that got kind of stuck. But again, when we made the song to this, it was like, forget all this technical shit. We've explored sequences, we've done loops, we've done synthesizers. What would happen if we kind of went back to basics and we didn't do every single fucking thing ourselves? What happens if we work with some backing singers and some people who play stuff that we couldn't play? And this ensemble was the result of that thinking. And the songs are relatively straight in comparison to some of the other stuff that we've done. This wasn't a particularly experimental album. And some of the subject matter was being driven by my interest in environmental concerns at the time. I think around about this time, I was one of the founders of a group called ARC, A-R-K, in the UK. that I founded with Chrissy Hind and a number of other people to try and create a sort of environmental pressure group that offered alternatives and didn't just say, wow, we have to do something. And part of the subject matter of this was kind of driven by that. And we thought it was a really interesting album, but it didn't kind of dovetail with anything that we'd ever done before.
Oh, it's different,
which was a shame because it was our last album as a duo.
Did you two ever consider?
But yeah, I have fond memories of making it.
Yeah, I love it. I think it flows probably the best of all the Godley and Cream albums. Just the way from beginning to end, the way the songs go from one to the next.
The weird thing is, though, the weird thing is that I think people came to expect albums that didn't flow from Godley and Cream. So this kind of bucked the Godley and Cream style.
Yeah, bucked the trend.
It was maybe too accessible. It just wasn't what Godley and Cream did. So,
You know, I would love to hear some of this music played live. And I'm wondering, did you two ever consider putting together a backing band and playing live?
no,
Never. No, never. Did you enjoy
no.
playing live back with 10cc, or were you kind of glad to be done with it once you were out of there?
It was part of the deal. I mean, it was when it was a good show, we'd done well. There's nothing like the applause of thousands of people to make you feel special.
Sure.
But we got a little bit lost in that sort of conundrum of trying to reproduce the sound of the record on stage. We got driven by that. That was our kind of motivation because we were really backroom boys. We were really producers who were lucky enough to have a few hit records. And the one thing that we were missing as a live band, we didn't have a visual identity. Therefore, it was fine. It was fun, but wasn't the thing that drove us, and still isn't the thing that drives me. So the thought of taking something on the road is like, who needs to do that?
Right.
I don't particularly want to do that unless I've got a great idea for it, for some reason or something that's super different. Then it's not something that appeals to me particularly.
Okay.
I mean, we were never Bowie, we were never Roxy Music. We didn't have. And that goes back to that conundrum I was talking about before. We had the capabilities of sitting down and conjuring some extraordinary visuals to go with what we were playing live, but we never applied ourselves to that, which is crazy because we both had degrees in graphic design, but we never pulled them out for 10cc. Bizarre.
Yeah, interesting. Kind of a missed opportunity, but it is what it is.
We just weren't into it. It just was not. That wasn't the reason we were there. All the energy that we had was devoted 100% to making the music.
Yeah. Okay.
I regret that.
Well, I wanted to segue into the video production and touch on a few of those.
Okay.
But I thought we'd talk about some of the Godley and Cream videos that you two did for your own music first. Am I right that was this the first video? I believe this was the one where you had an outside producer and you kind of elbowed him aside and said, "Here, this is kind of our vision," and realized, hey, we can produce these things. We can do this. We don't need someone outside trying to steer us.
Yeah, close. We were very pretentious and precocious, but we did have an idea. And very sensibly, the record label said, "Yeah, we like this, but you don't know a camera from a torch. So we're going to get someone who's done this before to do us. And they got a guy called Derek Burbage. He did the videos for the first 3 Police albums. So he had form, you know. So we were essentially the artists. But some of the things we storyboarded, we wanted to see. Like there was a scene where the bodies were stationary, but the heads were rotating and hands were rotating and stuff like that. And the way it actually came together was we did our bit, we did our performance. But we asked very strongly if we could be there while he was editing it. Because we were kind of intrigued as to see how he would put this together. Now he had all this raw material. And it was during that process, rather than the shooting, that the light came on again. The 2 light bulbs came on that said, fuck, we can do this shit. It was like, it was an epiphany, because it was the 2 things that we did quite well. We did music quite well, and we were art students, we were art school graduates. It was the perfect medium to fuse these 2 things together. So we started making suggestions to Derek in the edit suite. What happens if you do that? He said, well, that's a bit difficult to do, and we haven't got much time. So we'll try it. Just give it a shot. And so we tried it, and it worked, and we just kept butting in. And we must have been real pains in the arses, because we didn't know what we were doing. We just kept asking questions like, can you do this? Can you do that? And of course, the technology then was analog technology, and it wasn't designed to do everything we wanted to see. But somehow, 60% of what we asked for got done. And the finished result is a bit of a dog's dinner, but it's an interesting piece. And it's a combination of our thoughts about what might be possible in the future and what he won in Europe. Didn't do anything in the UK. It was a big hit in Europe. And Polydor, who was our label at the time, had recently signed Steve Strange and Visage to the label, the first of the new romantic bands. And we knew Steve. He was sort of, you know, we used to go around the clubs at that time. And he wanted us to do his first music video, which was our first professional engagement as video directors. And then the rest is history.
Yeah, I was
but yes, this was our first, this was our first kind of a very, very fast learning curve. And for me, it was extraordinary because I'd never been the front man before. This was me being the singer.
Yeah, well, I love that tune, and the video is very memorable. And it, you know, it reminds me a little bit of Herbie Hancock's Rocket. You know, this kind of with the dummies and
the robotic thing. Yeah, I guess I
mannequins and
never
all that.
thought that. That's interesting.
I do see a little bit of a similarity there. Um, Now this one, Wide Boy, one of my favorite tunes. You know, this is one that wasn't on an album. I was like a single. I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And just a really catchy tune with some interesting, unusual chord progressions and such.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit about the writing of this particular tune. Do you remember its genesis?
I don't know. I think it's got something of early Elvis Costello about it, with the sort of the Farfisa organ thing. We were just messing around as usual.
Yeah.
And we recorded this thing called Wide Boy, and everyone thought it would be an interesting single. And again, we needed a music video because everybody needed a music video back then.
Sure.
So we thought, well, who are we going to get to do the music video? We thought, well, we know these 2 guys called Godley and Creme, so we might as well get them to do it. They've got nothing else to do. But doing it was tricky because each sequence was a continuation of the previous sequence. So it must have taken a few days to actually put together, because that picture we're breaking through was taken from a different take. It was chosen, blown up, printed on a huge piece of paper, and then we jumped through it. So that background must have been shot on a different day.
Yeah.
And so on and so forth, all the way through the video. We ended up, I mean, the song wasn't a hit, as most of our songs weren't hits back then. But interestingly, the technique was used when we were asked to do, I think it was a cinema commercial for Wrangler jeans. So we used the same idea, but much better prepared and on film. This was shot on video. Mm-hmm. And it worked really well.
Yeah. Well, it's very memorable. Yeah, you could tell that this obviously was made over the course of a few days, because I mean, you basically had to go print all those big pictures up so you could burst through them later. You know,
that's crazy.
Where do you get something
if I remember
that big at?
Correctly.
So like
no idea.
Photography studio or something that specialized in giant.
He got it organized.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, looks like something that would be easy to do now. You get it stuck on the side of a bus.
Sure.
I remember Andy Mackay's in this video because he played sax on the original track.
It's great on it. Yeah, and Lawrence Juber's on it as well. Another guest I've had on my show. How did he wind up in the fray?
No idea. I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Mind you, I don't remember much about this period.
Yeah, you remember Lawrence was the last guitarist in Wings before Paul folded the group and went
right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Great player. Best lead guitarist Wings ever had, really. He was a studio cat before he hooked up with Paul. So great stuff there.
And then, of course, some great sidemen in it. Oh, right.
This one is groundbreaking. And you had Mr. T in it, so how could you go wrong, you know?
No. Well, he was a Mr. T lookalike.
Oh, was he? Okay. Well,
yeah.
Yeah, but just the whole morphing, you know, it's probably your most famous video, and you know, all these years later, it still has kind of a cutting edge quality to it.
It does. It's not morphing. That's what everybody seems to get wrong. It's called morphing, but this was a very simple analog editing technique that was used at the time, mostly for sort of rather crappy title sequences, where you could create a sort of circular wipe with a soft edge, and when you move the paddle, the wipe would open up and reveal what other picture was there behind it. Or you could do this, or you could do that. And we sort of came across, we knew it existed, but we didn't initially think that it would work for this particular idea. It's something worth pointing out that applies to all of Godley Creme music videos, is that, and to mine as well to a certain degree, they were all approached exactly the same way as we would approach making a piece of music. There was always room left in the process to play with our material in post. It was never just a matter of cutting to an exactly defined storyboard. There was always an element of, well, we won't figure it out all the way. We know we can make something out of this. Let's just go in with our dailies and see what happens. Yeah. So we probably had longer edit times than most people. We'd work all night a lot of times.
Well, I love
and just see, you know, it's like playing a solo, like playing. We play the pictures, and that's partially because the analog equipment you could physically touch. You could press buttons and cut, and you could use paddles to mix from one shot to another.
Yeah.
You can't do that anymore. But back then, you could play pictures, which is exactly what we did. And the original idea for a video for Cry was to have these two very popular ice skaters called Torvill and Dean skate to it, but they weren't available when we needed to make the film. So this was plan B. Let's find a bunch of people who could sing it, because it sounds like anything that somebody could sing. So we picked them out of a book, sent them cassettes. They showed up, we filmed them. Incidentally, the guy at the bottom middle is Nigel Gray, who I mentioned before, who owned and ran Sorry Sound Studios.
Oh, okay. Very interesting. Well, once you got started doing videos and were kind of a hot commodity, were you able to, were there any artists where you're like, I love their music, I want to make a video for them? Or was it more like the record company hooked you up with people that they needed a video for?
Yeah, more the second. I don't recall us ever approaching anybody and asking if we could do a video for them. It was 90% or 99% of the time, people would come to us and say, you know, are you interested in doing this? What do you think of this? And the great thing about it is, at the beginning, when there wasn't really a music video industry at all, it was all about the director. It was all about what they'd done, and it was all about trust. It was, you know, we don't know what a music video should be. This is our music. Just do something cool to this. And, you know, you weren't competing with maybe 6 other directors and a marketing department who think they know it all. You were just chosen as an artist in your own right, comparable to the artist who made the record. And your job was to come up with something that in some way, shape or form transmitted the feeling of this record to film.
Yeah.
And that's all it was. We were incredibly lucky to be able to do that.
Did you usually start by just listening to the song in question and then working up a storyboard to go with it?
We didn't do storyboards that often. We maybe, one thing that we never really did at all, which a lot of people did, we never did narrative. We figured out early on that a music video is a very particular environment. And to tell the story that is already being told in sound, to tell it in pictures as well, is showing and telling at the same time, and imprints your vision of the characters that the singer is singing about. And we didn't like that. It's like, no, what we should be doing is framing the song in a way that adds a visual element to it that is less defined than that. There's no point in us telling the story.
Right, it's already there.
We want, yeah, that's there already. You know, if you've met this girl and you've taken her home in the car and you've gone out for dinner, we don't want to see that shit. That is boring.
Right,
we want to, you know, music is mysterious stuff, so we wanted to create something that was a little bit more oblique than that.
Were there any other video producers at the time that inspired you? There's one video in particular that kind of makes me think of some of your work later, and that's Close to the Edit from Art and Noise. You remember the one where the little girl runs around yelling and 4 guys with chainsaws cut it?
Yeah, was that done by, I forget his name. Zbigniew Rubczynski.
Yeah. I thought that
loved his work.
That was pretty edgy at the time, and it kind of
very much so.
Yeah.
There were a few people. I mean, Spike Jones, another one. Later on, I forgot his name. There are a few people. Spike's particularly one. but Zbigniew was, I mean, he was more of a video artist than a video maker. But he did some remarkable stuff that weren't particularly for music videos that were fascinating. He formed his own kind of studio for experimental films. So yeah, there were a few people making weird shit, for want of a better expression, that we related to. And I guess it was the old Godley Creme vibe applied to pictures now. We still wanted to do weird shit, but instead of sound, we were doing it with pictures.
Sure.
But we got to work with some amazing artists, one way or another.
Well, just kind of looking through a few of these stills, it seems like the technology sometimes drove it. Like, for instance, well, this one, not so much. This is more about a small area and different shots that kind of make it seem bigger. Would you say that's right? Kind of, it's all about the angle.
Well, this was driven purely by this was driven by the robots themselves, which we came across purely by coincidence. But we knew instinctively when we saw them that what they did and what they looked like and how they moved would fit absolutely perfect with Herbie Hancock's rocket, which had recently arrived on our desk as a potential gig. So it was just a matter of application. It was a matter of applying Jim Whiting's creations to what we felt was an environment that would work, which is exactly what happened. So this was driven by somebody else's work, if you like.
Okay.
It was an instinct that this stuff will work with that. And there were times when a new development in editing technology would naturally spur us on to do something that would use it. Yeah, it's true to say that.
What was the average cost to make a music video back in the early 80s? And did the budget differ depending on how huge the star was?
To a degree, but most of our stuff was probably in the region of, I'd say, between £30,000 and £60,000. Not huge. I mean, the first one we did, Fade to Grey by Visage, was £5,000, and half of that went to the makeup artist. But the prices, the budgets kept going up as the need for videos kept going up. And when MTV burst onto the scene, then more videos were needed, and it became, it got a little bit out of hand.
Yeah.
We never got a chance to do Rocket. We never got a chance to do a Thriller. We never had that size of a budget to do.
Right.
I would imagine that probably the most expensive ones we did were for the Police. The three we did for the Police. But I have no idea what the actual budgets were. I don't think they were that big.
Yeah.
Because the ideas were all relatively contained.
Yeah.
No, we never grossed out.
Yeah.
We never did a consequences version of a video.
I see. Yeah. Now this seems to be all about these sequential panels that keep crossing the page until the end of the video. Was that just kind of an editing thing on the editing desk that was easy to employ once the film was done?
Remember, it could have been, but I think it might partially have been a stack of video monitors on set as well.
I think that was the second one, the Only Time Will Tell, where the gymnast is jumping over them and all that.
That's right.
Yeah.
I can't remember. The one thing I do remember and I don't remember which of the two videos you mentioned, I think it was the other one, when John Wetton showed up in the morning and he hadn't shaved, and we started shooting, and we got a lot of great footage, and then we broke for lunch, and then he came back after lunch and he shaved. And it was like, did anyone ever mention the word continuity to anybody?
Right.
And so we had to, before they emptied the shaver, we got the shaver and we emptied all the the hair out. We stuck it back on his face. It cost us a couple of hours. But, you know, we were still learning our shit back then.
Right.
But that was funny.
That was, well, those Asia songs were huge, and it was interesting to see a bunch of old prog rock guys kind of get a fresh um, go around, you know, and
Yeah,
it was
that was
interesting.
difficult.
It was interesting seeing how those guys dealt with the oncoming '80s just in their original bands and the changes they went
Yeah,
through. Some of
it,
them were good, and some of them were kind of difficult. It's not exactly
but
their greatest record sometimes towards the end of the
no, they
70s.
were well, particularly in the medium of video. A number of people we worked with uh, weren't immediately comfortable with it. It was like we had to kind of ease them in. It was strange. I mean, the biggest change was for this kind of a band. Ears were becoming very popular again. People were showing their ears, whereas with this kind of band, ears hadn't been seen for many a year.
Right.
So that kind of, and you know, some of not the kind of stuff we did, but you know, bands making videos about that suddenly were, you know, oh, you mean we have to act? We're musicians, man. You
Yeah.
know, um, I mean, it was great, and some guys just threw themselves into it and just got the vibe and loved it, and some guys were made for it. You know, the Police were made for this kind of medium. Um, but I'll never forget, we did a video for Sting's first solo album, which I think we shot in Paris, called Set Them Free.
Yeah, yeah, I've got
And
it.
he assembled a great band.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
have a. There we go.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The bass player, what's the bass player's name? He ended up playing
Daryl
with the Stones
Jones.
in the end.
Yeah, it's been with the Stones for
Darryl Jones.
a long
Okay,
time now.
so Darryl Jones. You know, we had a wardrobe person there, and we wanted to dress everyone to look great. And we were about to dress him, and he said, "Don't fuck with my groove, man." Which meant I'm happy with the way I looked. I do not want you to mess with how I looked. Which is kind of indicative of that transitional period of people. I mean, don't forget, a lot of the very influential videos around about the time, even in the States, were coming out of Europe and coming out of the UK, where there was a stylistic shift taking place. It had gone from rock and roll to punk to new wave, and so on and so forth. And so the more of a European stylistic way of dressing was becoming more and more dominant in music videos. There was a much straighter style and fashion-based style. And this didn't fit with a lot of the old rockers, you know, the old guys who were just straight musicians. They didn't quite get the vibe or wanted to get the vibe. So that was problematic a little bit sometimes. But there was a point where everyone went, fuck it, and switched. That
Right.
became
Well, you could
obvious.
see it just kind of going through the '80s and seeing how the videos changed
Mm.
and the different kind of techniques. Like this has this kind of almost like they're cut out and pasted on this background, and they fade in and out depending on who is playing or featured at the moment. Yeah.
That's right. I
Was
mean,
that all done in post?
technically, this shouldn't have, yeah, all done in post, and technically it shouldn't have worked because this was done before non-linear editing existed. There was no digital editing when we made this. So every separate layer, every person who was shot differently and applied differently to the master recording, we lost quality every time we added the next person. And there
It's
are how
kind of
many layers? One, two, three,
like when
four.
you bounce in the studio.
Exactly the same as when you bounce on tape in the
Yeah.
studio. And there's got to be at least 6 layers in this. So that's 6 layers of loss of quality. Still looks good, but not as good as it would have been had we have shot on digital. But it didn't exist.
Yeah. Well, I think it adds to the charm, honestly.
Yeah, we took a chance. So
Yeah. So this one, I was watching, there's actually a video on YouTube showing you guys doing this, and I believe you did 16 different versions of it and then edited them all
Yeah.
together. Yeah.
No, well, we did 16 different versions of it, and each one was a standalone film. But then we were asked to do one that used some of the techniques on the original shots, if you know what I mean, to create something more akin to a normal, fast cut music video, a sort of compilation, if you like, of all the things that could be done. But there were the band, yes, I had a terrible, not terrible, but an interesting experience trying to explain the concept of this to Chris Squire while I was having a bath. I remember he wanted to know what we had in mind. And I just said, well, you're just going to be standing there in various positions and we're going to be shooting you. And that's it. That's all you have to do. And it was a long silence. I said, okay. And then we did it. And again, the reason we did it was because at the time, videos as an art film, as a medium, everything was getting very fast, cut, with lots of scenes and lots of people and
Right.
stuff going on. That was kind of how you might define what a music video is. So we figured instead of doing one video with lots of cuts, let's do lots of videos with no cuts, which is what the 16 different films were. And one of the films was the whole band. They were all upside down for some bizarre reason. I don't know why, but it worked. And the name of the game was to make your piece of work stand out from the rest, which this certainly did. And I think they ran some kind of competition based around it on MTV at the time, because it was a great record.
Yeah.
But one of the ones that we did at the band, one of the shots that we took of the band was the band upside down with their backs to the camera. And I think we'd spent the entire day doing all the other versions, which were equally simple, but we left this one to the end. And so, tracks started to play, cue sound, roll camera, action, which was effectively none. And the camera just filmed away at the back view of the band. And traditionally, at the end of every take on all the other videos that we've done, all the other single shots, everyone would applaud the end to applaud their non-performance. However, on this one, because they had that backs to camera, we all left the studio. Cameraman left the studio, sound guy left the studio, all the crew, and me and Lol Creme left the studio. So when the song ended and they turned around, there was nobody there.
Oh, that's too funny.
Such fucking schoolboys.
Yeah.
We were.
Yeah.
But it just telling you the story of the idea, it just tells me that there always had to be a little sense of jeopardy about making these things, because we were so aware, and it's true to say that the medium did descend into blandness and predictability, and the things that usually happen when something becomes very successful, they become equally predictable because people want to play safe to make sure they have hit videos as well as hit records.
Well, I think
and that was something we were always railing against.
Well, I love that sense of adventure, and I think the whole '80s, just the way it unfolded musically, I really feel like some of the best stuff was in the first half. Like I've had the pleasure of playing in an '80s cover band a few times in my life, and I think 90% of our set list came from the first 5 years, because the second half was like dominated by Whitney Houston and a lot of these kind of big singer types rather than so I just felt like a lot of the adventure had been polished off by the time the second half of the decade rolled around. Although there were some interesting
it did. It became a marketing exercise.
Yeah. So this one, it occurred to me that there were a lot of these post-apocalyptic themed videos in the early 80s. And I'm wondering if Mad Max was like
Yeah,
the inspiration for all of this because it's funny, it's like everybody's walking around in the rubble of a blown up burnt town and they're just carefully they're dancing in the streets, you know. It's like the bomb dropped, but the hell with it, let's just party. It's kind of the
yeah,
gist of a lot of those
yeah,
videos. And
yeah,
and this one kind of follows that track a bit, but
yeah.
so I take it this was all done on a giant sound stage with lots of stuff just kind of piled up randomly to create this kind
Big
of.
set in shot in Shepperson Studios, I think over 2 days. And this had a bit of real Jeopardy in it because um, apart from these amazing structures made of scaffolding and thematically drums, guitar, and microphones, on the floor there were lights, but also a lot of litter, a lot of paper on the floor being blown around, as you can see, by wind machines. And at some point during the filming, the paper caught fire.
Oh,
Uh, so there was, in the middle of the take, so there was a little bit of panic, getting the band off the shooting stage. So yeah, Jeopardy came home. But some funny moments. I remember one particular moment, a treasured moment, where Sting is hanging in this particular shot and looking magnificent, fantastic. And then a newspaper slaps him in the face and stays there for about 30 seconds. That, that wasn't the take we used, but it was a great moment.
oh yeah, yeah.
But yeah, these kind of shoots, that was a big shoot. That was a really big shoot. But and I don't think health and safety would allow us to do anything like that today. We'd never get that shot done. It would all probably be done by CGI in post. But it
Yeah.
was an amazing shoot, as you can imagine. All the three that we did for the police were very strong.
This was a very compelling video. Every time it came on, it was just demanded your attention. And it's such a great song with such a great forward momentum that, yeah, just one of the
Yeah,
best of the 80s, I think. One of my
performance
favorites.
though. The performance was staggeringly good.
And I love the bit where Andy Summers is swinging the guitar over his head like that. You must have
Oh,
found a lot
yeah,
of old
that
crappy
was.
guitars for this video, you know?
I don't know. I think I think it was the real one. I think it was
Yeah.
the real one. I remember we used a device on this. I think we were the first people to use a thing called a hothead, which is a remote head for a camera that was on the end of a crane. Normally, when you're using a crane, the camera sits with the camera. Cameraman sits with the camera and is moved around on the end of the
Right.
crane, and the cameraman operates it. This had two wheels down at the base of the crane to have the camera going that way or that way. And we were lucky enough to see it being demonstrated for us in a practical way on the set of the second Indiana Jones movies. Um, the scene where the female lead is being lowered into the pit from hell,
Right.
and people, they were using the hothead to go around the edges of the set to show those sort of skeletons hung in alcoves all around the set. And we actually went to the shoot. I think that was taking place in Pinewood Studios at the time. So we got to see this device in action, something that revolutionized what you could do.
Yeah.
So that's a good example of technology helping you get something done where you couldn't do it before.
Right. And kind of furthering
Because
your
we had to go
options.
in.
Kind of
Yeah, we
furthering
could
your
go sort of
options.
on yeah, we could go sort of closer to the scaffolding, under scaffolding. Whereas if you had a camera up there, a camera guy up there, you wouldn't have been able to do that. So that gave us some really good options.
Yeah. Now this one, isn't this all about post-production editing? That fast, kind of stuttery looking kind of editing?
again, it was a piece of new equipment which I think has now disappeared. And I don't know why they invented this, but they'd come up with what could best be described as a visual sequencer, whereby if you'd filmed, say, 6 separate scenes, you could program this device to cut between all of those scenes in a continuous loop for however many frames you wanted. So we figured, well, if we shot a video that was relatively stationary, where the camera was locked off, but we did it a number of times and each performance, we would ask the main performers to do exactly the same. We knew it would never be exactly the same, and that we could add other elements to the picture that would be seen fleetingly. At least that was the theory, and that's exactly what happened. It looks like animation, and it's just a series of 2-frame cuts circling around on maybe 6 different takes from the same camera position with different things going on in the frame for the entire video. So all we did was we chose, we're going to cut between this bunch of shots, and we're going to cut between this bunch of shots and this bunch of shots. And we did takes all the way through, mastered them, and then cut bits from each of those takes together.
But you knew in
it worked
advance.
really well.
You knew in advance the end result you were going to get, right?
Kind of, because we'd done something similar that didn't work. I forget the name of the guy, the artist who we did it for. It'll come to me, but it didn't work. And one thing we discovered is that if you cut that fast between elements where nothing is the same, where every single cut is different, it's impossible to watch because it's too fast for too long. And there's no root, there's no core to hold your attention. And that's something we learned. And we were still fascinated by what this could give us. So we just thought about it and figured out that if there was an element that stayed the same, but the contents of the frame would change, but the room would always be the same, we figured out that would work. Again, we didn't know until we'd done it.
Was this done on a soundstage?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's just a set. So basically, it's a 2-wall set with a floor.
Okay. Well, it's very effective. And I don't know if you saw it, but Wang Chung did a recent reworking of this song with an orchestra, and they made a new video.
No, I didn't see that.
Did you see the video? They made a video in the past year that uses the same quick editing kind of style. So yeah.
No, I didn't. I wasn't aware of that.
It's really fun, really nicely done.
I'll check it out.
And it sounds really good with the orchestra. It really works surprisingly well.
Right.
Yeah, so that's a fun one. Yeah. And then we talked about Sting. Now this must have been a real treat for you guys to work with a couple Beatles.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit about that.
It was. It was. I mean, the first of these guys that we got to work with was Ringo Starr. I remember Lol and I were in LA doing something. I forget what we were doing now. And we got a call asking if we'd be interested in doing a short film for Ringo featuring, I think it was 3 of his songs. I think the impetus of that came from Paul. And so, yeah, so we did this. It was kind of a concept video called The Cooler, all shot on video, all on soundstage. And it turned out quite well for what it was. And he was amazing to work with. And I don't know, I kind of get the feeling that when you're in that kind of a camp and they like working with you, then that kind of maybe spreads. And so we were asked to do this for George. And it was a great track. it was in that time when he was bringing records out, having hits in the 80s as a solo performer. And it was great. It's interesting that you've picked that frame to show, because there were all sorts of rumors going around about who that was on the left, the walrus. Who is the walrus?
Yeah.
And somebody thought there's a guy walking through frame at some point pushing a cart full of groceries, fruit and veg. And somebody thought that was Paul Simon. Somebody thought that was John Lennon. No,
Right.
that was our manager, John Gayden.
Yeah.
The guy walking through with the cart full of groceries was an extra. You know, there's something about the Beatles that legends grow from, and legends grew around this. But it was a blast to do. You know, Elton was there, and it was fun. It was a fun piece of work.
And that was when he was collaborating with Jeff Lynne on VLO. Jeff became quite a in-demand producer and a good friend of his. They wound up having a band together a few years later. And
Right.
yeah, but I love this video. I loved it. It's probably my favorite one of the ones from this record, and I love the bit at the end where you
It's
have
a
the kind
fun
of
piece.
kind of the Indian mysticism at the end, where George has all the different arms like Vishnu. That was a nice touch.
And the
And
buildings are doing this and everything.
yeah,
It's sort of
and
very kind of psychedelic.
and the bit where he dressed up in his Sergeant Pepper outfit for a couple frames.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
great to see him dressed up like that again. Yeah. So yeah.
It was very exciting shoot. It was a very exciting shoot. Again, the Jeopardy was there. How would George react to arms coming out from a wall being like, how would that play? How would that work? It worked.
I bet he loved it. You know, it was.
Yeah, it was fun. It was kind of light. But it was interesting. It wasn't too light. It wasn't too bland. It was interesting to watch. There were things happening that you didn't expect to happen.
Yeah.
But it was in keeping.
Yeah, that's a great one. Love it. This is the last one I want to talk about. This seemed to be almost like cameras on the end of a boom stuck in there, almost like a selfie stick from today, where you can stick a camera right in their face. Is that kind of what was going on?
That's exactly what was going on. I'm trying to remember what these cameras were called. They're medical cameras, I think. And they're tiny little things. And they use them now, you know, stick down your throats and see with a little light on, see what's going on inside you.
Sometimes they'll clip it to the headstock of a guitar and kind of give you that looking down the fretboard look while they're playing. Yeah.
That's right. I don't think anyone had used them as a video before, but we saw what they could do, and we thought, shit, we can go in the bell of a saxophone, we can go in someone's mouth, we can go all sorts of places, but we won't go there. We'll go there instead. You know, and we kind of figured it would make for an interesting video that was essentially a performance video. But to look at the performance as if you're actually almost part of the instrument itself or part of the singer. And it worked really well.
Yeah.
Really well. They were good to work with, a good bunch of guys to work with. They were up for it. And it was done relatively quickly and without any pain. And we had some great rushes to edit from, you know? Yeah. So that was a fun one to do.
Yeah, that's a great one. So which videos are you proudest of all these years later?
Oh, Jesus. Well, from the Godley and Creme years, probably the obvious ones are the three we did for the police, all for different reasons. Possibly the one I like the best is Wrapped Around Your Finger,
with the
because
candles.
I think it was the candles, because I think it was the first time anyone had done something that was in slow-mo, but the lip sync was in real time. Yeah. We figured out a way of doing that. So that one is important. Rocket, Herbie Hancock, obviously. Two Tribes, the extended mix for Frankie Goes to Hollywood. That bunch really were kind of my top votes. The stuff I've done as a solo director, all the videos I've made for U2, I'm very, very, very happy with. But I think, and it wasn't a video, this was a long form piece that I did for the BBC in 1990. And it was called One World, One Voice. That, to me, is something that I'm most proud of. I don't know if you're aware of it at all, but it
Oh, I think I
was
am. Was this the project where you had many different artists from around the world come together and play on a number of different tracks? I think Sting was involved and some other people.
except they didn't come to yeah, except they didn't come together. It was the opposite. I was asked to conceive an idea to celebrate the end of 2 weeks of environmental concern broadcasting on BBC Two. And they originally wanted to do a concert like Live Aid. They wanted to bring all these artists in, and it was like, no, you won't better Live Aid. But what if we did what I could loosely describe as a chain tape? We went to them. We'd start a piece of music in one place with the sound crew and the film crew, which we did with Sting in New York, and start creating a piece of music. Then we travel around the world adding people to that piece of music.
Oh, that's right.
So we went to them, and there are over 250 artists, some well-known, some not so well-known, some completely unknown.
Yeah.
But
I
the
have
fact that
watched
we
that.
actually managed, the fact that we did that, myself with Rupert Hine, God rest his soul, producing and recording it with equipment that was not meant to do that, and communication systems that didn't exist to allow us to get material from one place to another so someone could write and rehearse something. So when we showed up to shoot them, they had it ready to go. There was no retransfer, there was nothing like that, there was no email.
Sure.
It was tapes going across the world by, American Express and so on and so forth. How we actually managed to get that done, I will never know. But as an achievement, for me, that is, one of the most special things, as was filming U2's show, Zoo TV Live.
Oh, yeah.
That also was a hell of a challenge, but something. And neither of those really depended that much on effects or ideas. It was, both were very kind of human experiences. So it was, looking back, as well as the videos that I think some of which were groundbreaking, it's the bigger things that stick with me, at least at this point.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for spending the evening going down memory lane with me. Is there anything you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap it up?
Well, I hope. Well, first of all, forgive my eyes. My eyes are fucked, because I seem to be spending so much time staring at screens. I'm on Zoom calls or I'm writing, so forgive me blinking all the time. My eyes are completely shot. But the other thing is, I hope you find what we've been talking about interesting, because it comes from a time where things were forming, where the rules didn't exist yet in many cases, and those are always the best times, when people don't quite know what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's when they do their best work, in my opinion.
Well,
it's when everybody knows what they're doing and how it should work, it turns to shit.
Yeah, well, I think that's my takeaway in general, is just, forge new ground, try things that haven't been done. If something is typical, try it backwards and see how it works. Just take chances and push past the norms.
Yeah, how are you going to get a thrill out of doing something that someone else has done? They'll probably do it better than you anyway. So what's the point?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love your sense of adventure, Kevin. That's it's very inspiring.
Thank you.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, that was very enjoyable and very thorough. You've
Well,
done
thank
your
you.
homework.
Yeah, well, thank you for indulging me. I mean, I know you discussed a lot of this previously, but it was nice to put it all together in one spot on my show. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. My
Right.
pleasure.
Well, what's next
What
for
time is
you?
it there?
Oh, it's about
Well, next.
5:30. It's about
Okay.
5:30. I'm gonna
It
run off to
is.
a rehearsal here in a little bit. I'm playing in a
What are you
tribute.
rehearsing?
Yeah, I'm playing in a tribute to Steely Dan. We do it once every year at a little jazz
Oh,
club
great.
here in Atlanta, and we've got a great team
Yeah.
put together. We're going to play their whole first album, Can't Buy a Thrill, and an hour of other best ofs. And yeah, I always enjoy it. It's a lot of fun.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. What's next for me? Dinner.
Yeah, dinner.
Dinner is
Okay.
for
Well,
me.
gosh, I'm sorry to keep
Next.
you waiting.
Dinner.
Yeah, yeah.
No, no, you're all right. You're all right. You're all
And
right. You're all right.
I would love
Enjoyed it
to.
very much.
I would love to have a group someday that could play some of your music live, and I'm working on it. So fingers crossed, it'd be a real treat. I'm such
Oh,
such a big fan of sophisticated pop music, and you did some of the best. There's other groups that I really love as well, like XTC and Squeeze and groups of that nature. And you guys hang really nicely in that group, that realm, I think. Although you guys did it first.
thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've definitely inspired me. I just spending the past 6 months really digging into your catalog has been a joyous journey. So thank you for all the wonderful music.
It's fine. We would have done it anyway.
It's true. Well, I'm glad I got to know it so well.
I know.
Very inspiring.
Yeah. No, we listen. When you do this stuff, you have to enjoy doing it. It's not a job. It's not a job. You figure out after a certain amount of times what you're here to do, so you just go along,
Sure,
and
absolutely.
it's that's not changed.
Yeah, absolutely. No, well, the joy comes through.
Okay, man.
Definitely. All
Yeah.
right. Well,
Let's go and see if I can add some Jeopardy to dinner.
there you go. Alrighty. Well, best of uh, best of luck to you, Kevin. Thank you so much for your time. Give my best to your wife. Tell
My
her,
pleasure.
sorry I kept you so
I
long.
will.
Alrighty.
That's
Well,
all right. My
all right.
pleasure.
All right. Take care.